The city was glowing that night. Towers of glass and steel rose like giants, and at the very top of one tower, the richest man in the city prepared for his greatest evening. His name was Mr. Adrian Kane, the CEO of the largest company in the world. People whispered his name with both fear and respect. He was powerful, he was ruthless, and tonight, he was sure his plan would succeed. Inside his grand hall, chandeliers sparkled like stars. Music played softly, and servants rushed about, placing golden plates and crystal glasses on long tables. The air smelled of perfume, wine, and expensive flowers. Every corner of the room shouted wealth. Mr. Kane stood near the balcony, hands behind his back, looking down at the city lights. His sharp suit was black as midnight, his tie blood red. His face carried the smile of a man who believed nothing could go wrong. Tonight was not just a party. It was the night when his only son, Daniel Kane, would choose his future bride. The plan was simple: Daniel would marry into another rich family, and together, their power would grow. The invitations had gone out weeks ago. Only the richest and most powerful families were invited. Politicians, investors, and leaders of old money, everyone was here. Their daughters were dressed like queens, jewels shining brighter than the chandeliers above. They had practiced their smiles, their words, their charm. All of them dreamed of becoming Mrs. Kane, wife to the heir of the greatest empire. But Mr. Kane's smile was not warm. It was sharp, like a blade. For him, this was not about love. Love was weak, useless, a distraction. For him, marriage was a business deal. His son's marriage would be a weapon, a bond of wealth and power. He turned as Daniel entered the hall. Daniel was tall, young, and handsome. His black suit fit perfectly, his eyes cold and unreadable. He walked with the calm strength of someone who feared no one. The music softened as all eyes turned to him. Girls whispered to each other, fixing their dresses and hair. Mothers pushed their daughters forward. Fathers straightened their backs, ready to offer smiles and promises. Mr. Kane watched his son carefully. Everything depended on him now. Tonight, the CEO thought, he will make the choice. And once he does, the city will bow even lower before me. The hall grew louder. Daughters of great families surrounded Daniel, their laughter like bells. They asked about his life, his dreams, his plans. They tried to charm him with soft voices and clever words. But Daniel did not smile. Not once. He listened, nodded, but his eyes remained cold, distant, unreadable. Mr. Kane's smile grew weaker. Something was wrong. The clock ticked on. The crowd grew restless. Why was Daniel not speaking? Why was he not choosing? The richest socialite in the room, daughter of a billionaire banker, stepped forward with her jeweled gown glittering under the lights. She offered Daniel her hand with a smile practiced 100 times. The crowd leaned forward, waiting. Surely this was it. Surely he would take her hand. But Daniel's eyes passed over her like she was nothing more than smoke. Mr. Kane's jaw tightened. His heart beat faster. Daniel moved. He stepped away from the center of the crowd, ignoring the women with their perfect faces and expensive dresses. He walked slowly, calmly, as if he had known his path from the beginning. The room grew quiet. Whispers stopped. Even the music seemed to fade. And then he stopped. Every eye followed his hand as it lifted. Every guest held their breath. Daniel Kane was pointing. The crowd gasped. The air turned heavy, almost crushing. Because he was not pointing at the banker's daughter, nor at the princess of old money, nor at the daughters of power and wealth. He was pointing at the maid. She stood frozen, holding a silver tray, her simple black dress plain against the sea of silk and diamonds. Her hair was tied back, her face pale with shock. She had been invisible until now, just another servant walking through the grand hall. But now, every eye was on her. Mr. Kane's face turned white. His perfect plan cracked in an instant. The crowd erupted into whispers, laughter, and disbelief. "The maid," someone hissed. He pointed to the maid. The richest daughters stared in shock, their smiles dying. The fathers frowned, angry and insulted. But Daniel's face did not change. His hand remained steady. His voice, calm and clear, echoed across the hall. "I choose her." The words struck like thunder. The maid's tray shook in her hands, glasses almost falling. Her wide eyes filled with fear. She had never been noticed before, never by anyone important, and now the heir of the Kane Empire had chosen her in front of the entire city's elite. Mr. Kane's heart pounded. Rage boiled inside him, but he could not speak, not yet, not in front of everyone. His perfect plan, his grand night, his carefully built empire, was it all about to fall apart because of his son's madness? The music had stopped. The whispers filled the silence like knives cutting the air. The city would not forget this night. And Mr. Kane knew this was only the beginning. The grand hall was no longer filled with music and laughter. Instead, it was filled with whispers, gasps, and sharp breaths. The richest men and women stared in disbelief, as if they had just witnessed something impossible. Daniel Kane, heir of the Kane Empire, had ignored every jewel-covered daughter of the city's elite. He had walked past silk gowns, painted smiles, and hands heavy with diamonds. And then, in front of everyone, he had chosen the maid. The maid still stood frozen, clutching her tray. A glass slipped from the edge and fell, shattering into pieces on the marble floor. The sound echoed through the hall like the breaking of Mr. Kane's perfect plan. Mr. Adrian Kane's face turned red with rage. His jaw clenched so hard it looked like stone. He wanted to shout, to drag his son away, to erase this shame. But the eyes of the city were watching. He could not explode, not here. Not now. Daniel, however, was calm. He didn't blink, didn't hesitate. His voice had been clear, and he repeated it, louder this time, for all to hear. "I choose her." The crowd erupted. Laughter burst from one corner, sharp and cruel. A group of young men mocked, clapping as if it were a joke. "The maid. The Kane heir chooses a servant," one sneered. Some women gasped in horror, covering their mouths with jeweled hands. Others whispered to each other, their voices filled with venom. Is this rebellion? Is he mocking his own father? He cannot be serious. But Daniel was serious. His cold eyes scanned the hall, daring anyone to laugh at him directly. The mocking voices grew weaker. The cruel smiles faded. His gaze was heavy, unshakable. The maid finally found her voice. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Yes, sir. I cannot. I." She looked around, trapped under hundreds of eyes. She wanted to run, to hide, to disappear into the kitchens where she belonged. But Daniel did not lower his hand. "You," he said firmly, "come forward." The maid's heart pounded in her chest. Her hands shook. But her feet moved on their own, carrying her to the center of the hall. She looked so small compared to the glittering daughters, her plain black dress making her stand out like a shadow among stars. Mr. Kane's anger burned hotter. He forced a smile for the guests, but his eyes were fire. "Daniel," he said through gritted teeth, his voice low but sharp. "This is not the time for jokes." Daniel turned his head slowly. His stare cut through his father like a blade. "Do I look like I am joking?" The hall went silent again. Mr. Kane's hands curled into fists. He wanted to end this madness right there. But Daniel was no longer a child. He was a man, standing strong before the city, refusing to bend. The richest socialite, the banker's daughter, stepped forward. Her face was pale with shock, but her voice dripped with anger. "This is insulting," she snapped. "We came here with respect, dressed for honor, ready to bind our family with yours. And you humiliate us for a maid." Others began to agree, their voices rising in fury. "Shameful," one father shouted. "The Kane heir is mocking tradition," another yelled. But Daniel did not flinch. His voice was cold, calm, final. "I do not care for your wealth. I do not care for your power. I will not live my life as a puppet in my father's games. I choose who I want. And I choose her." The maid's knees almost gave out. She felt like she was dreaming, trapped in a nightmare she didn't understand. Why her? Why would the heir of the Kane Empire choose someone like her? Mr. Kane could no longer hide his fury. His perfect plan, his grand evening, was turning into disaster. His guests, his allies, his business partners, they were watching his empire crumble in front of their eyes. But Daniel stood firm, his back straight, his eyes unshakable. He was silent most of his life, obeying his father's rules, following his father's orders. But tonight, his silence had broken. Tonight, he had spoken, and his words were rebellion. The crowd continued to argue, voices overlapping like thunder. Some laughed. Some shouted. Some whispered that the Kane Empire was falling apart from within. And in the middle of it all, the maid stood trembling, her secret burning inside her chest. For she was not what she seemed. She was not just a maid. But no one knew that yet. Not even Daniel's father. Mr. Kane's voice finally cut through the chaos, sharp as a whip. "Enough." The hall froze. His eyes locked on Daniel. "You will regret this choice. You have no idea what storm you are calling into our house." Daniel's reply was quiet, but it struck harder than any shout. "No, father. It is you who has no idea." And with those words, the rebellion had begun. The storm inside the grand hall did not end. Even after Mr. Kane's command of silence, whispers returned like snakes hissing in the dark. Guests could not believe what they had seen. The heir of the Kane Empire had pointed not to wealth, not to beauty, but to a servant girl. The maid stood at the center, trembling, her hands clenched in front of her. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, her whole body frozen under the weight of hundreds of stares. She had always been invisible, moving through rooms like a shadow. But tonight, she was under a burning light. Mr. Kane's voice was low but filled with rage. "Girl," he said, spitting the word as if it was dirt. "Do you even know what you are doing? Do you understand the insult you bring by standing there?" The maid's lips parted, but no words came. Her throat was dry, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break her ribs. Daniel stepped closer, his presence calm but commanding. His hand reached out not gently, but firmly pulling her forward so no one could ignore her. "She does not need to speak," he said coldly. I have chosen. The crowd gasped again. Some guests shook their heads, some whispered that Daniel had lost his mind. But a few, the older ones who watched carefully, narrowed their eyes. Something about the maid's face, her eyes, her bearing, it stirred faint memories. The banker's daughter laughed bitterly, her jeweled hand waving in mockery. She's nothing. A nobody. Look at her dress, look at her hands, they are stained with work. She belongs in the kitchen, not at the cane table. The maid's eyes lowered, shame burning inside her. But then Daniel's voice cut through, sharp as steel. Do not speak of her again. The room went quiet. Even the arrogant socialites took a step back. Mr. Kane was boiling. His perfect mask of power was slipping. His eyes darted to the maid, studying her more carefully now. Something about her face, it tugged at a memory buried long ago. Who are you? He demanded. What is your family name? The maid froze. Her lips trembled. She wanted to lie, to stay silent, to run. But the question was heavy, and the truth pressed inside her like fire waiting to escape. She opened her mouth, but before she could answer, Daniel spoke for her. His tone was calm, but his words struck the hall like thunder. You want her name, father? Fine. She is not just a maid. She is Elise Hart. The room gasped. Several guests whispered fiercely among themselves. Others looked shocked, even afraid. Elise's eyes widened. She had kept her family name hidden for years, buried deep so no one would find her. But Daniel had known all along. Mr. Kane frowned, searching his memory. And then it came back to him. The Harts. A family that once held power, wealth, and honor. A family that had been destroyed years ago, ruined by betrayal, crushed by rivals, erased from the city. Their fortune was stolen, their lands taken, their name turned to ash. And now, standing before him, was their last living daughter. Elise Hart. The maid. Gasps filled the hall again. Some remembered the story, the fall of the Hart family. Some whispered of bloodlines, of enemies, of debts never repaid. Mr. Kane's fury deepened. His voice was sharp, filled with scorn. So this is your plan, Daniel? To drag a ruined family's bloodline into my house? To bind yourself to nothing but dust and shame? Elise's head lifted slowly. For the first time, she looked Mr. Kane in the eyes. Her voice was soft, but steady. Dust and shame, because men like you made it so. The hall froze. Her words were like knives. No maid had ever dared speak to the great Adrian Kane like that. But Elise was no ordinary maid. She carried a secret weight inside her, a flame that had been waiting to rise. Daniel's voice followed hers, calm but unyielding. You thought the Harts were finished. You were wrong. I will not marry power built on lies. I will not marry wealth built on blood. I will restore what was lost. And I will do it with her. The crowd erupted once more. Some laughed, some gasped, some muttered that Daniel had gone mad. But others, older and wiser, whispered to each other with troubled looks. Because they remembered something else, the Harts had once been allies to empires, defenders of truth, a family with pride and honor that rivaled even the Kanes. Their fall had been suspicious, filled with shadows. And now, their last heir had returned, hidden all these years as a servant girl. Mr. Kane's hands shook with fury. His voice was cold, filled with poison. You do not know what you are doing, Daniel. That girl will destroy you. She will destroy everything we built. Daniel stepped closer to Elise, his presence like a shield around her. His words were steady. "No, father. She will save it." The maid no, Elise's heart stood taller now. Fear was still in her eyes, but something stronger rose within her. A strength she had buried, a pride she thought she had lost. The city would soon learn, she was not a servant. She was a survivor. And this secret was only the beginning. The grand hall had turned into a battlefield of whispers and shock. The richest families shifted uncomfortably in their golden chairs, their daughters lowering their eyes in shame. The Kane Empire, the city's strongest name, was no longer shining. It was trembling because of one choice, one rebellion. Adrian Kane, the CEO, felt his chest burning. Rage filled his veins like fire. He had spent his life building power brick by brick, deal by deal, betrayal by betrayal. He had crushed rivals, broken enemies, and bent politicians. But now, his own son threatened to undo everything in a single night. He slammed his hand on the long dining table. The sound echoed like thunder. Crystal glasses shook, and the hall froze. "Enough!" Adrian roared. His voice was deep, sharp, commanding. Everyone fell silent, too afraid to breathe. He turned slowly toward his son, his eyes blazing. "You humiliate me in front of the city. You insult every ally we have. You throw away honor for a servant." Daniel stood tall, unshaken. "She is not just a servant. You know her name now. You know her blood." Adrian's lip curled. "The hearts are finished. Dead. Their blood is worthless." Elisa's fists tightened at her side, but her voice was calm. "Our blood is not worthless. It is clean, unlike yours." The room gasped. The guests stared in disbelief. A maid no, a fallen heir was challenging the most powerful man alive. Adrian's rage boiled over. He took a step forward, pointing a finger at Elise. "Do not speak to me. You belong in dirt, in silence, in the shadows where I put you." Daniel stepped in front of her, blocking his father's hand. His cold eyes locked onto Adrian's. "If you touch her, even once, you will no longer have a son." The hall turned icy. The CEO, feared by all, was now face to face with defiance he could not control. Adrian's voice lowered, but it was deadlier than before. "You think you are strong because you defy me? You are weak. You are blind. That girl will destroy everything. Do you know why her family fell, Daniel? Do you?" Daniel did not answer. Elisa's eyes dropped, pain flashing across her face. Adrian smirked, his anger turning into cruel laughter. They were not victims. They were fools. They trusted honor. They trusted truth. And they paid with everything. Their wealth, their name, their lives gone. Because in this world, power is not given to the good. It is taken by the ruthless. He leaned closer, his words venom. "I took it, Daniel. I crushed them. I ended them. And now you bring their ghost into my house." The crowd froze. Some gasped, some whispered, some tried to hide their shock. Adrian had just admitted it. The Kane Empire had risen not just on brilliance, but on blood. Elisa's body shook. Tears threatened her eyes, but her voice was steady. "You ruined us. You killed everything we were. And you think this is victory? No, Adrian Kane. This is rot. This is poison." Adrian laughed bitterly. "Poison? It is survival. Daniel's voice cut like a blade. No. It is decay. And I will not inherit decay. The father and son stared at each other, two flames ready to consume everything. One was the old fire of power, ruthless and cruel. The other was the new fire of rebellion, cold but unbreakable. The guests could barely move. They felt like they were watching the fall of an empire, right before their eyes. Adrian finally straightened, his smile cruel again. Very well. If you want rebellion, you will have rebellion. But know this, Daniel, you will regret it. She will regret it. I will burn her name again, and this time, I will make sure nothing survives. Not even ashes. Elise lifted her chin, her voice trembling but brave. You cannot erase the truth forever. Adrian's laugh was low and dangerous. Watch me. He turned to the guests, spreading his arms as if nothing had happened. Enjoy the evening. The Kane family will deal with this mistake. But the guests no longer saw power in him. They saw cracks, shadows, weakness hidden under his rage. Some whispered already, the Kane Empire is breaking. The son defies the father. The past returns to haunt the present. Daniel leaned close to Elise, whispering so only she could hear. He will come after you. He will try to destroy you again. Her eyes met his. Then let him try. I survived once. I will survive again. And in that moment, the air shifted. The battle was no longer about wealth or marriage. It was about survival, justice, and truth. The Kane Empire had ruled for decades. But tonight, in the shadows of rage, its fall had begun. The night that began with music and perfume had turned into a night of war. The grand hall was no longer a place of laughter, it was a battlefield of eyes, whispers, and fear. The Kane Empire, proud and untouchable, stood on shaky ground. Adrian Kane, the CEO, sat at the head of the golden table. His face was calm now, but behind that calmness burned fire. His rage was like a storm waiting to break. His son's rebellion was not just shame, it was a direct threat to everything he had built. Across the room, Daniel stood beside Elise. His hand was steady at her back, a shield against the storm. He had never looked stronger. He had never looked freer. The guests remained, but they were restless. Some whispered of betrayal. Others whispered of destiny. Some feared the Kanes were finished. Some hoped it was true. Adrian rose slowly from his chair. His voice carried across the hall like a hammer. Listen to me. My son is lost. He is blind. He has chosen ruin over greatness. But I will not let the city fall into weakness. I will not let a broken family name return to power. He turned toward Elise, his eyes filled with hatred. You should have stayed hidden. You should have remained nothing. Elise trembled, but only for a moment. Then she lifted her chin. Her voice, soft but sharp, filled the silence. I was nothing because you made me nothing. You destroyed my family. You burned our name. But you could not kill the truth. And the truth always returns. The crowd stirred. Their eyes moved between Adrian and Elise, sensing something greater than a family quarrel. Daniel's voice followed, cold and clear. You wanted me to marry wealth, to bind myself to power. But power built on blood is weak. I will not inherit weakness. I will not inherit your lies. Adrian's mask cracked. His voice thundered. You think you are strong? You think standing beside her makes you powerful? She will destroy you, Daniel. She will drag you into the grave where her family belongs. But Elisa's reply cut deeper than steel. No, I will not drag him down. I will lift him higher. Because unlike you, Adrian Kane, he knows the difference between fear and respect. He knows power means nothing without truth. The hall gasped. For the first time, Adrian Kane, the most feared man in the city, looked smaller. His shadow seemed weaker, his power less certain. The banker's daughter, pale with shame, whispered to her mother, "She is not a servant. She is fire." One of the older guests, who remembered the Hart family, nodded slowly. The Harts were destroyed by betrayal. Maybe it is time the city learns the truth. Adrian's fury exploded. He slammed his hand against the table. Enough. Do you fools not understand? This girl carries a cursed name. I erased her family once, and I will erase them again. No matter who protects her. Daniel's eyes narrowed. His voice was like ice. You will not touch her. You will not control me. Your empire ends where her life begins. The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone in the hall knew it, a new era was being born. Elise stepped forward, her voice stronger than ever. I am Elise Hart. I am the last of my family. And I will not bow to the man who destroyed us. I will not hide in shadows anymore. You call me nothing? Then watch how nothing rises and burns your empire to the ground. The crowd erupted into whispers, fear and awe mixing in every voice. Some looked at Adrian with disgust. Others looked at Elise with new respect. Adrian Kane's face was pale, twisted with rage. For the first time in decades, he felt the ground beneath him crack. His son had turned against him. His past crimes were no longer buried. His empire was no longer safe. Daniel's final words sealed it. Father, you built your empire with lies. But I will build something greater with truth. And the city will see the difference. The chandeliers flickered as if the air itself trembled. The night was ending, but something far greater was beginning. The Kane Empire had been feared for generations. But fear was breaking. A new power was rising, not born from wealth or corruption, but from defiance, from survival, from truth. The CEO's plan had failed. His empire was cracking. And in the heart of the city, a servant girl, no, a forgotten heir, stood ready to change everything. The maid was never meant to serve. She was meant to rule.